Welcome, bin muckers. Today we have fellow friend Malcolm McKinjay, ex-football player with me on the Tufts Jumbos, software engineer now at Slack, hell of a video game player, and fellow crypto bull. How are we doing today, Malcolm? I appreciate you taking some time to come on the Bin Mucker podcast.
Yeah, Chup, thank you for having me. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to meet with me and we can chat.
Of course,
But yeah,
always a pleasure.
ex Tufts football, Robos,
Yes,
and
sir.
now learning about the current financial system because nobody taught me it growing up.
That right there is such a good point. I mean, it is ridiculous that we have the most complicated tax code in the world here in the United States, yet we're not taught a thing about our finances. And
And the IRS knows me. I've gotten a letter from the IRS before. They'll get theirs. Whether you know how to get them theirs or not, they're gonna get theirs.
well, dude, now the fact that they're talking about beefing up the IRS, even though
hmm
like they already go after high net worth individuals, so the fact that they want to beef it up and target like lower and middle class people, which I mean, it seems to be more of a spending problem than a revenue problem. You know, like
I think you got to have both. I think the spending was necessary most recently purely because of COVID. I think COVID just throws off everything. Like, I think we would personally be I think it's fair to say we'd be in a better financial point in like the US without COVID. Because without COVID, we wouldn't have to have printed like 40% of the current circulating supply. Um, which
yeah,
obviously we just can't be doing all the time. But during COVID, it seemed necessary, especially with the amount of people that weren't able to go to work. Now it's just like, how do we recover from that?
yeah. I mean, I think Bitcoin in specific, but also cryptocurrency in general, it does help in a lot of ways.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we spent billions of dollars over the last couple of years, and most of that money is just going into the hands of the people. So people have more money to spend. People have more income to actually invest. Like, one big part about investing is that some people don't have any money to invest because they're living paycheck to paycheck. This is like the first time in a while, I believe, that it's like the most retail investors have entered the market in the past like 2, 3 years.
You see, I do agree. That is such a positive sign that retail investors were able to enter the market. Apps like Robinhood, SoFi, many others. I
Right.
mean, I know Robinhood gets some shit because of the whole GME thing, but they weren't the only one to stop trading, and they
They were
are
my first. Robinhood was my first. They introduced me.
same, man, same. And I do think that is awesome. But I also worry. I feel like we're seeing new highs like almost every other day in the S&P 500, and part of me
Right.
does worry that most of that stimulus money, just because at the scale these organizations are and how good they are at just when you're that big, I feel like a lot of the money printed went to big corporations. um and it is the
Oh damn!
stimulus
I'm
checks
looking
were
at the
nice.
S&P chart right now.
Yeah, no, it
This is
went.
wild.
And it's not, when you think about small businesses in the US, like many were crushed by COVID. And I know the PPP loans were good in that sense that they were able to like help out businesses that were decimated.
Mhm.
Um, but I don't know. I feel like you can't look at the stock market. Obviously, the S&P is like how the U.S. economy is actually doing, and I do worry all that money printing. I'm glad we have Bitcoin because
Mhm.
I do not want the U.S. dollar to hyperinflate, and I think it's far from it. I think it's the best fiat in the world. It is the world reserve currency, but you can't just keep spending. It's like I saw a stat. It was like I want to say since 2008, um, tax revenue has gone up every single year since 2008. But
Mhm.
the spending deficit, if this is tax revenue, this is spending. So every year the
They're
deficit is
separating.
just the deficit's just grown and grown and grown, and now it's like 30 trillion. It's a very it's right under 30 trillion, but
Right.
that's a lot of
I
debt.
think I definitely don't think the U.S. is nearing hyperinflation by any means. Like, do I think the U.S. is going to end up like Venezuela? No. Do I think that the US could enter double digit inflation if the Fed doesn't really taper off their bond purchases? Yes. But I was looking at inflation rates in the 80s when they were like really bad or relative really bad. They were like 14, 15%
Hmm.
for a couple years. I think that's where we could head, right?
Well,
I think
you know what's
that's
crazy? If you take the CPI measurement, the Consumer Price Index
uh-huh.
from the 80s, not what they had, because the economists do tweak it over time. And
Mhm.
I understand they have to adjust it, but if you take that 80s measurement, we're at like 14% CPI inflation, which is double digits
Really
already. Yeah, yeah. And like I said, I know they do have some legit reasons for adjusting it, but at the same time,
mhm.
like when you can kind of pick and choose what you put into
Into the CPI
into the CPI to
and how
get.
you calculate it. Yeah, 100%. I think that with like the current, like however they calculate it currently, I think
Mhm.
we could hit the same levels as 1980 if the Fed doesn't taper off their bond purchasing. I haven't really been as familiar about the subject. I've been researching it a lot recently. And so from like my understanding of a separation between like the central government and the like central bank,
Mhm.
our the United States' central bank, like the Fed, says they're trying to taper off bond purchases multiple times over the next year. Um, so I think that could help, and I think that will not lead us into a today's 15% inflation rate.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a really important point with it because when you think about it, like why did the Fed print money? And it was to make sure we didn't default on our debt.
Mhm.
And it's like if the Fed didn't print money, a lot of people's retirements accounts in their 401ks, Roth IRA, whatever, a lot of people just put that money in like low risk bonds, stuff like that.
They would have had
And
to dip into it.
yeah, and honestly, if the Fed hadn't printed money, these savings accounts could have gone to I don't want to say zero, but they really could have crashed, which is not what you want to see from a low risk asset. Like something people are saving for in their 401ks. So
Right. You expect that in Bitcoin.
yeah, exactly. Like you get used to Bitcoin, but that's kind of the beauty. Like I don't think people understand how early we are. I think global credit markets, so like bonds and shit in the globe. This is
Mhm.
not just the U.S. Global. It's like a $400 trillion market, and Bitcoin, which is the biggest of all of them, it's crossed a trillion, but it's not even $1 trillion asset as of today, December 22nd, 2021. It's like it's right over that $900 trillion mark for the market cap. It's still so early, and I'm so hopeful. I think a lot of altcoins, but just especially Bitcoin, um, as people get a little more, it's like as the Fed keeps pushing people out on the risk curve.
Yeah.
I think we'll see a lot more pensions, people's 401k, stuff like that going to Bitcoin. I mean, we saw the Houston Fire Department put Bitcoin and Ethereum
Mhm.
on their pension and their
Oh
pension
wow, that's
fund.
awesome.
Yeah, isn't that like so? It's still so
I would
important
do
for like we're.
that.
I mean, seriously, like I got a 401k and it's invested in the Vanguard ETF, and like I would much rather have it in some Bitcoin even if it's MicroStrategy stock or something.
Right.
But it is exciting, and we are very early. And the best thing people can do is just learn about Bitcoin and these other assets and use them. And it's just so incredible to think that we can send value to another person anywhere on this planet in a permissionless, decentralized manner, as long as they're using the same rails, the Bitcoin network.
Yeah, it's us. Right. And it's also really nice to I kind of get really happy whenever I get to say a nice FU to the bank because they just benefit so much off of us. Uh, and so now I recently have just like moved most of my savings into Anchor Protocol on the Terra blockchain because I'm getting 19.5% a year on a stable coin
I
versus
mean,
me just chilling in a high yield savings account for like 0.04%. Like nice.
amen, dude. Like, it's like it seems mind boggling that like I understand the SEC is processes, but money is just changing so fast. And the fact that you can get that, like you're so right. Like the banks are very predatorial and they screw over the people who have the least amount of money. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it's ridiculous their business model. It should be the other way around. And it's incredible that stable coins and there's so many innovations happening right now in the space that
Yeah, absolutely.
I think will create a much more fair, equal, and beneficial environment for especially the early adopters, but really anyone who wants to come in. And yeah, I just think kids, like they're so good with technology, they're so good with their iPads. Do you think they'll opt into the legacy bank system where they got to go and see some banker in a suit and tie to ask what they can do with their money?
Right.
paid for wire transfers. It's like you can send $1 billion of value over the Bitcoin network for $1.25, be put in a block in 10 minutes if you pay a little extra for fees.
Right.
So it gets priority, and once it's in, that's it. There's like irreversible, doesn't matter, good, bad. It's just it just seems inevitable. Nothing's guaranteed, but it just seems inevitable.
Yeah, I mean, I was at Thanksgiving this past year, and I'm walking in. I'm walking in the room like some of my family is over because we weren't together last year, and it was nice to have everyone over. I see
Mm-hmm.
my nieces and my nephews, and everyone's glued to an iPad, and I'm just like, "What the hell is going on?" I was just like, "Oh, you're just like buying stuff on Roblox. Oh, wait, you're like building full on castles in Roblox. Like, you got more skills than me, and you're like 6."
Dude, I played Decentraland the other day, and like just logging on to that and just seeing like you use your wallet, so you don't have to put an email or password. You can use your non-custodial wallet, log in, you see these virtual worlds. People have built like houses, and then you can walk around in the house and see their NFTs, their artwork that is
Right.
hyperlinked to where you could buy said NFT if you like it or bid on it. I mean, like the possibilities just seem endless with this stuff.
Yeah, people are thinking. I think the metaverse is probably my favorite part of crypto, even though it's probably my least invested part of crypto. Right now, favorite because I have my ideas. I love Ready Player One. I'm already scoping
Great
out
movie.
the 360-degree treadmills. Like I know where you can find the best one on the market, the best actual headsets, and then they have haptic feedback vests so where you can actually feel like feedback from the game.
Dude, that thing in Ready Player One, like that just seems like it almost seems like technology could get too good to the point where it's like, why would I leave my house when I can put
That's
on
the
this thing?
scary part. It's like, oh
That
wait, I
is
gotta
right.
eat. I gotta eat.
I gotta eat. I gotta shower. I gotta go to the bath. Like,
Yeah. Like water breaks are gonna be a real thing. It's like, all right, everybody, go drink some water. We've been here for 8 hours in this World of Warcraft raid in Decentraland. We
yeah.
need to take a break.
You do wonder too, though, if you could almost have it be like a form of exercise, where like if you have kind of like I don't know, a little area where you're like up in
Hmm.
the air and you can like move around, like at least you could get the blood flowing that way. Like,
Yeah, and I mean, like for me, I hate running long distance. It's very monotonous. It's very boring. But I've seen people. They're like, I don't do fitness, but I ran across the entire VR world of Skyrim. It's like running around in some fantasy world, or if you're like running from quest to quest and like transitioning through areas where you really do want to be and you really want to experience, I think it'll happen naturally, you know? Like I can totally see myself like I've recently just bought a jump rope. I've been jump roping inside the house.
hell yeah.
But I'm more likely to roam through a metaverse like walking around over jump roping if I'm getting more exercise out of the metaverse because the metaverse is more fun in the first place.
100%. I mean, imagine almost like a little treadmill thing you could walk on. Like,
Yeah.
especially now with football being over. Like, I always hated running, and I don't love it now. But like, I like the Nike Run Club app, and just
Uh-huh.
not having a coach yelling at me. Like only running for my own health because I want to do it. But
Yeah.
even walking around, like like with the jump, it's so much better exercising having like only doing it for yourself, not having a coach tell you do it, not because you have to.
Yeah. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm stretching right now. I'm like, this feels good.
Yeah, 100%, 100%.
Yeah.
So what would you say made you go down the crypto rabbit hole? I know you're a software engineer, but like what was the
Hmm.
thing that got you hooked in this incredible space?
So this probably started around June, I'd say. I didn't start investing in crypto June. I was looking at real estate. And I was looking at real estate. I was doing so much research. I was learning about the MLS, how to actually compare houses,
Yep.
talking about like repairs, operating costs. I wasn't looking in New York City because my budget wasn't New York City.
Were you looking to
And
get a rental or were you looking to like move in for yourself?
I was going to get a rental. I was going to buy either a single family unit or multifamily unit. And I was looking in Detroit, which I still think is a good area, a possible good area to buy in. Atlanta, Houston, all
Atlanta's
those
great.
areas. And so I was doing that, and then I wanted to speak to somebody who knew more than me. Called my buddy's dad, who he does real estate for a little bit. He mainly does pharmaceutical investments. And I
Like
was just
commercial
like,
real estate for pharmaceutical places?
no, he does pharmaceutical investments for, let's say, one example is they invested in a drug that cured like 90% of cases of shingles. It was like a vaccine for shingles. And
Nice.
so they invest in that because that research lab is like running out of money. They don't
Mhm.
get the royalty for that drug. They get the royalties for their next like 5 drugs. His idea is that if you find some smart people, they're not just going to solve one problem once they've solved it. They're going to find something else to solve. But he told me just straight up, he was like, you have no competitive advantage in real estate, being completely honest with you. And he told me to find what I had a competitive advantage in. And I thought that was anything technology related. And I said, I can read through code, I can read through docs, I can sort of tell when people are trying to bullshit me or not about like how important something is or how useful something is or like what it can do. And then I just got into crypto. My cousin is really into crypto. He got me in basically. Um, and I just started finding projects. And so right now, my biggest thing is just DeFi. Like anything decentralized finance related, I'm normally like searching about it because it was another way of teaching myself finance.
Hell
Um,
yeah. I
and
mean,
then
it's
learning about
that
actual
competitive
finance.
advantage. Mm.
Yeah. And then learning about actual finance and being just like, why would I ever want to do this? Why would I ever want to go back once I can get 20% on a stable coin and my money's insured? That's the thing. Like if the stable coin depegs or Anchor is compromised or exploited, I get my money back. My money's insured.
On the Anchor protocol, it is?
Yeah, I pay a separate fee for that money to be insured,
Still though.
but I'm
I mean,
getting
but
more
20%
interest.
risk free, like, and like you said, the competitive advantage, you can read through the code. Like you're very aware when it comes to code and software engineering. And I mean, like, not to go back to the bond thing, but it's like, how could people who are investing in like bonds that the Fed's having to bail out right now,
Yeah,
making fucking
2% over. I think it
literally
was like
one to
two
three
point
percent.
eight percent for 30 years, for 30-year bond.
it's,
Like, oh
oh,
wow,
that's crazy. And what a
yeah,
good point too. I mean, like for anything, like I really haven't thought about that much, but just finding what you're really good at and then using that competitive advantage to your benefit. And what a perfect thing for you going down the crypto rabbit hole.
right. But even inside crypto, there are different sectors of crypto that have different sort of competitive advantages. Like
True.
as a for an example, like I've done game development. I've shipped a game on Steam. I've worked with a small indie game company before. And so my understanding of like the NFT space, like I like NFTs. I don't invest in NFTs that don't have use cases. So like I'm not a bored ape. Like I'd be happy if I got a bored ape. Like don't get me wrong.
Hmm.
If I got a bored ape on the mint, I wouldn't be upset.
Yeah.
But most of my NFT plays are game related because I understand like game design.
Hmm. Yeah.
I understand. I've taken game design as a class in school. I've done it professionally, and at the end of the day, nobody is going to play your game unless it's really fun or you're making a lot of money. And if you can do both, that's the best thing.
I mean, dude, I just think of all the Madden, Call of Duty, Fortnite I played, like still play. And if you're telling me I could have monetized that, you know what I mean? Like if I
Yeah.
could literally sell my Omega skin in Fortnite or like John Wick,
Yep.
you know, like any of like the early like if I could like if I knew there was an economic incentive to do so,
Yeah.
that's gonna change. Like you said with the kids, like they love the freaking iPads. And if you can create a good game where they can monetize it and create value for their
Yeah. It's
time
creating
and
value.
while
And
having fun,
like,
game
why
over.
not? So
Ex-
like my favorite example is like the have you heard of Diablo or seen any like Diablo gameplay?
I think I've seen a trailer for the game.
Awesome. Well, there's an auction house in Diablo. Like there was an open market auction house in Diablo. It was all with in-game currency, but you have to go through quests to actually get items, right? You have to go through raids and dungeons. And sometimes you have to run the same dungeon multiple times to get a single item just because the drop rate is so low. Now, what happens if all of those items are NFT? And all those items can actually be tracked. People are already buying gold in World of Warcraft and Diablo and then transferring it to their accounts to use on this auction house. That the only thing that is created or spent when you get these items are the user's time. Now, what happens if you actually reward the user with like an NFT of that item? Like that rare piece of armor is an NFT. Yes, you can use it in game, but you can also trade that to another person. And like you can actually just play that game for a living because you can have people that just grind for gear and then sell it on the marketplace.
Literally.
Like all of those things are still going to happen even without NFTs, but all this does is give ownership to the actual players. Because when the game turns off, all those items are gone. But if they're NFTs, they still hold value and they can still be traded and held and moved around.
Yep. I got kids at my work who have literally sold RuneScape gold for cash. I don't know
Yeah.
exactly what they do, but I mean, like, there's just such a clear demand for it, and it's going to be a lot of people who literally play video games for a living, which is kind of awesome. I mean, that is unreal that they can do that.
And new revenue streams, because I love the idea of revenue stream of like residual income for NFTs, especially for like physical world use case artists. Like when an artist sells a painting, they only get the income from that initial sale.
Yeah, the resale value, the royalties.
Yeah. So even if a game company were to take 10% or less than 10% of every future sale of their NFTs, that creates an entirely new revenue stream for game companies that they currently don't have, which will allow them to keep their prices of games lower and allow them to put more efforts and like hire more people and pay people livable wages. Because the price of making games is just going up, but the price of making games are just going up. The games are stuck at $60, $70. They don't really fit.
I mean, it's a better system for both the consumer and the creator of the game. Like everyone wins in it.
That's
With
exactly
the royalties and the fact that people are even more incentivized to play your game. More time's going to go into it. They can use that data to create an even better game, get more user feedback. I mean, it's just like an infinite loop of reinforcement and everyone winning together, essentially.
Exactly. It also helps us stop having those cash grabs and just loot boxes. You see that everything that EA puts out nowadays, or just buying VC and 2K.
Dude. I mean,
imagine if the park was a metaverse.
Yeah, I saw Tim Ferriss tweet the other day, and he was like, email is like being in a tent surrounded with fly or mosquitoes or something like that. Like you're trying to meditate in the tent, and it just seems like everything now is like trying to sell to it. You know what I mean? Like if you opt into one thing, it's just amazing how just how personalized and how tracked we are, and how much stuff we get recommended to us. But it does seem and I go back and forth like between like thinking Bitcoin is the only coin that has a chance. Well, I think it is the only coin that has a chance to be a global reserve currency. But then also like I really do believe it's going to be a multi-chain world, and so many of these other cryptocurrencies will be used. And I don't think Bitcoin is going to be the cryptocurrency that it's built on, the play to earn games, the NFTs, stuff like that. Bitcoin is going to be this global reserve currency, hopefully the sound money that everyone in the world agrees is like the global currency. And then all these other things can be used to
or whatever their use case really is,
exactly, whether it be a stable coin where you're getting 20% APY or whether it's an NFT in a game for the proof of work, the time you put into that game.
Yeah, I definitely believe that Bitcoin will be like that gold standard when it comes to currency in the future. There are a couple plays right now that are really trying to be the reserve currencies as well. Like one of my most recent ones is Ohm. First question you have to always answer is, why is Ohm not a Ponzi scheme?
Yeah. First question in crypto.
First question is, why is this not a Ponzi scheme? They're like, how do I get 5,000% APY? It's like, well, let me explain. Please. But the Ohm's goal is to be like the reserve currency of crypto. In my opinion, more the reserve currency of DeFi. They basically have these crazy high APYs until their coins in circulation hit a certain point, and then it continuously drops. The goal is for it to end finally around like 3% a year APY. And because the APY is so high, the price is trading way above what these coins are currently backed at. But the idea is that as long as the treasury grows, they are able to back Ohm at a higher price. Right now, there have been a ton of forks off of Ohm. So you have things like Klima DAO, you have Time, that are all working off of this. And as there is more sell pressure and as more people are selling Ohm, the APY actually goes up. So it incentivizes users to stay. And the idea is that if the price drops and people are selling and the APY goes really high, your losses will be offset by the extremely high APY as long as you like continue to stake. So I've been like playing around in Ohm and Time, and as long as the treasury is bringing in more than a certain amount of money each day, everything makes sense.
Is it a
Uh,
proof of a stake chain or a proof of work chain?
Ohm is an ERC20 token on Ethereum,
Mm,
and it's for Olympus DAO.
nice.
And an interesting thing is like one of the forks, Time, created by Daniele Frog Nation, as the leader of Frog Nation, as we know him, created a fork off of Ohm called Time. And what they did recently is they took 54 million UST out of their treasury. They like converted most of their like $54 million worth of their treasury into UST,
US
and
Terra or
yes, and put
Terra.
that in Anchor. And so using their degen box of using leverage, they are now generating over $150,000 a day to the treasury.
I mean, like obviously, there's no way that could like the fact that even they can do that for a day, or like that is insane for staking, like yield, like not like.
Yep, they're in $150,000 a day. They're getting 117% APY on a stable coin. This is some true degen shit, and I kind of gone into a hole, but it's all very possible. I can get like 47% like super safely along with insurance, and I'm just like, hey, as long as it works and as long as I have my insurance, I'll be all right.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously, like everyone do their own research. This is not financial advice.
This is
Anything in this
not financial
podcast.
advice
This is not
at
financial
all.
advice.
None of
But I mean, good for them, man. If they can get that on, however they're doing that, my God, unreal. But out of curiosity, what would you say? What are your thoughts on proof of stake versus proof of work chains? I know Ethereum ERC20, which a ton of
Mhm.
tokens are built on, is kind of in that process of transitioning from proof of work to proof of stake. And I'm curious, kind of what you think about it.
I actually think so. I do think things need to go to proof of stake, purely for environmental reasons, as well as if it does go to proof of stake, you need
You
to
think
find a way.
Bitcoin too, not just Ethereum, or are you
No,
saying
Bitcoin can do whatever it wants.
so?
Because
Just
Bitcoin can do whatever it wants because
oh yeah, no,
Bitcoin
okay. Just want,
because
I'm
Bitcoin
glad to
was their
hear it.
first.
Yeah.
Bitcoin is sort of looked at as the standard of like what needs to happen. So
Mm-hmm.
like, yes, we want things to be proof of stake, but if they are proof of work for a reason, Bitcoin was the first. They're not going to change. They have other things to figure out before they change their entire like mining process. But things coming out in the future, it probably should be proof of stake. We have things that have already shown that it's possible and that it can, with the right incentives in place and the right deterrence, that it can foster a more decentralized set of validators. So, like what Cardano does is you need like your 65 million ADA.
Mm-hmm.
Most people aren't whales. Most people don't have like 65 million ADA in their wallets. So that incentivizes you to delegate to a delegation pool.
Mm-hmm.
After you delegate to that delegation pool, they say we don't want all of the power inside of a single delegation pool. So you will get your 5% APY on your ADA for staking to a delegation pool until your delegation pool is past. I think it's like 85 million ADA. After 85 million ADA, your rewards are slashed,
Mm-hmm.
which incentivizes people to start a new delegation pool.
To keep it more decentralized, I'm guessing
Yep.
is kind of the theory. That is pretty cool, and I do think there's absolutely use to proof of stake chains, especially the more decentralized you can keep them. But I think what's cool about Bitcoin's proof of work, especially now since you need like the ASICs, the application specific interface computers that all they do is try and hash that function. You know that they cost like I want to say it's like roughly 10,000 for one ASIC S19 miner or something.
Right.
And what's cool is I was watching this documentary. I'll put the link to. I think I actually put it in the last podcast I did. But it just talked about how Bitcoin encourages green energy because they can go and build out the infrastructure to help their own grid, and they can do it with the risk being limited incredibly because if you plug into if you can monetize that volcano energy in El Salvador or geothermal energy in Iceland or the flaring that gets done in Wyoming that's just going to waste otherwise. If you use that energy and plug it in and start the ASIC S19s mining Bitcoin, you're generating liquidity.
It's net negative.
Yeah, it's net negative. You're building out green energy for your own grid because I mean, energy is so important to like if energy
was like the highest increase in the CPI.
And it's the most important. I mean, think about how crucial energy is to human civilization. Our cars to get around, to transport food, to keep the electricity going. I mean, it is so important. And the Bitcoin encourages green energy. It encourages green energy innovation, and it really reduces the risk. So these entrepreneurs who want to go out and monetize this energy that it would just be way too risky if there wasn't Bitcoin to proof of work mine.
Right.
So the fun that gets spread in the mainstream media is so ridiculous and so frustrating that they gaslight their audience and kind of don't do the research behind it. When it's helping, it's a benefit to the world. It's like, don't get me wrong, I like Christmas lights, and I'm not advocating for people to take down Christmas lights, but like to say Bitcoin mining is bad for the environments, but Christmas lights are okay is just.
Right. When you're looking at it from if this was ethics and we were looking at it from like a utilitarian stand of view, Bitcoin is using energy but producing more good than Christmas lights. So we should cut Christmas lights before we cut Bitcoin. I don't think Bitcoin is promoting green energy. I think it's a reason we need to go to green energy because I do think that Bitcoin is the future. And that's why any actual like stocks I hold are all renewable energies because my idea is that if it works, I make money. If it doesn't, we all die anyway, so it's okay.
Bro, I got the same. I'm slowly I'm thinking about putting the majority of my wealth, cashing out my stocks, going all in on Bitcoin because I'm with you. It's like I don't want to live in a world where I think when you give humans the ability to print money, no matter how just or honest or good their cause might have been, like it's just too big of a temptation to give the ability to print money to humans. That we will bail ourselves out. We will. So we need something that's programmatically fixed on the supply side, no matter what happens on the demand side. And with proof of work and the fact that you got to get the specific hardware to mine Bitcoin, I think Bitcoin is by far the best chance we have at like the only chance really at this point with the way, because the network, it's like the bigger it gets, the stronger it gets, the more impossible a 51, nothing impossible, but a 51% attack becomes, which is really the only attack vector, the only way you can attack the Bitcoin network, unless an EMP goes off and the internet goes out on the world, and then we got, then we got bigger problems.
Then we have bigger,
Bitcoin, so it's
people's like defibrillators are going to stop. People are going to stop breathing in the hospital.
Yeah, we got bigger fish to fry if the internet goes out.
Speaking to like some of that renewable energy stuff, I know that they just dropped they're doing testing off of California, Washington State. They're doing testings of harnessing wave energy off the coast because they realized if they could capture all of the energy off of the West Coast with these like devices that sway back and forth, it took a crazy amount of engineering because they had to capture wave energy both going into the shoreline and coming out. So it has to like sway back and forth, but something has to turn to generate that electricity. Someone got paid a lot of money to figure that problem out, right? But now they're deploying the solution and testing it out, and they believe it can power like half of the country's energy requirements just by capturing the energy of waves on both of the coasts.
Damn, that would be awesome. I
Yeah,
hope
it
that
would be
project
able to
is
do over
successful.
half. As so that coupled with like both solar, which does a job, and then as well as wind energy. And so I think it really is like we can't just invest in one form of renewable energy to get the job done. We do really need to delegate, we need to use all of the sources and resources we have in regards to energy to be able to have a green country.
Yeah,
Uh,
100%. Out of curiosity, and I'm no energy expert. I know it's
mhm.
very important to the grid. But I've seen both sides for nuclear energy, and as I understand it, it seems like obviously it's very important. There's not another Chernobyl situation, but as I understand it, seems like nuclear energy is actually one of the cleanest energies we have to date. Um, and I know there's kind of been some controversy with California shutting down their nuclear power plants and then rolling blackouts.
Mhm.
Do you have an opinion on nuclear energy?
I
Is
think
it
my
clean?
idea on nuclear energy is I'm not familiar with like the greenness or like any emissions. My issue is always just that it's finite.
Nuclear energy?
Um, yeah, don't we need like actual nuclear materials to then like create that energy? We need like
I believe we do, but I think I'm really not sure, but I think it's a lot more.
it's
We
a
got a
lot more
lot more.
nuanced than how I described it.
We got much more uranium than oil per se.
Right.
Like we're gonna run out of
Yeah.
oil much sooner than we'll run out of. I think it's uranium, whatever that really high radioactive compound is they use
Right.
in nuclear energy.
Well, when I think about it, I'm thinking past, us, our grandchildren, our grandchildren's grandchildren. I actually do think like when I think about energy and like supplying it for the world, I'm
Hmm.
thinking Elon Musk idea of us not being here anymore and we needing to be able
Multiplanetary
to
species.
harness energy wherever we are. So there might not be uranium on Mars. There's not, in
Yeah.
my account, there's no uranium on Mars, but we need to be able to harness energy and whatever energy is available. And anywhere that we can inhabit, normally there's water, light, and wind.
Yeah.
We just need to become the avatar, basically. It's fine.
You bring up with the whole thing for like future generations. It's also going to be really interesting to think about like how they're going to look at our ancestors. The fact that like we can record this podcast and potentially our kids, grandkids down at some point, if we're lucky enough to have them, they can look back and see this. And now that this digital age is kicked off, and it really wasn't that long ago, like you could go back and read your like parents and grandparents diaries or journals or photos or whatever they had, but just how much more robust our digital signatures, identities, whatever, are going to be online now. And going forward too, I don't think this trend is going to slow down. I think more of our lives will be online and recorded, and photos can be so easily spread and shared now. Our iPhone camera compared like 10 years ago is like the quality of that iPhone camera is
Through the roof.
yeah, especially
You have three
you would have,
cameras.
yeah, 10 years ago you literally would have had to buy like a multi-$1,000 camera.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Or we're just going to look pixelated as shit.
Looking like a crypto punk.
Yeah, you're going to be looking like a crypto punk taking a picture on your Nokia. Literally.
Yeah, I do wonder. But I think it'll be cool. I think they'll appreciate the fact that they can look back and be like, damn, yeah, like they'll feel like they knew you, even if you're gone, like it'll be it'll be a nice way to remember that person.
Right. I think one thing that really is the thing stopping crypto from big adoption, or the things honestly stopping me from sending it and literally just using crypto, is like the easeability to spend. With Coinbase, I have a Coinbase card now, and I've used
Same.
it.
Hell yeah.
Yep, I have a
USDC,
Coinbase card.
baby. Yep.
Exactly. But the thing is that USDC makes me uncomfortable.
How come?
USDC is depegged slightly too much for me, and it's not depegged like a ton. But in my mind, where I'm like, damn, I we depegged like a couple cents today. Why did I lose $100 today randomly? And it does come
In
back.
USDC,
Yeah.
United States dollars coin issued by Circle.
We did depeg. I
Damn.
cashed out on USDC. We depegged. It wasn't a lot,
Still though, I mean,
but any amount of
stable
depegging
coin
is
is
just
meant to
like
be stable.
stable, right? So I've just wanted to find a way of like spending other sorts of stable coins that aren't taxed in the same way. Because with Coinbase, whatever coin you use that's not USDC is treated with a however they tax for transactions because they actually just sell your asset and then they like handle all of the payments. Yeah, so easier ways of taking my crypto to the deli when I just want a bacon, egg, and cheese in the morning.
I feel you there, and I mean that is kind of like I've never seen USDC depeg, but I if it did, it would definitely freak me out. And typically, I only put in like $100 at a time of USDC. Use the Coinbase debit card at places because 4% back in Stellar Lumens, which I typically just convert to Bitcoin at a later date, anyways. But still, like the fact that I can get 4% back cashback rewards on a debit card. It cost me, it's like 1-to-1 to buy USDC. There's no fee. That's just incredible. I mean, like that's better, on my Apple card. If I do the Apple credit card with Apple Pay, it's 2% back on my credit card for cash that, screw cash. I want crypto.
Right.
But I know what you're saying. It's not like the only reason I still use Wells Fargo, a legacy bank, is because I got to pay my rent with a check. So
yeah, same.
yeah. So like that's like the only reason I keep my legacy bank around. Otherwise, like
only reason I have a checkbook right now.
Amen. I know Apple hasn't put it on their Apple Wallet yet, but dude, the interface is just too sleek. Like we're gonna have cash, Bitcoin, ETH, whatever other crypto you want to use. It's all just gonna be in the Apple. Like
we're pushing UST today, US Terra.
Bro, I tell you
what, of the future.
I bought 2.5 Terra, like at just $100 worth when it was at 40. And
you're doing great.
Yeah, but it's like that meme of the guy who's like, yeah, bro, I'm up like 40% on the year. The guy's like, hell yeah, how much you put in? The guy's like, $200. Like, honestly, hindsight's 2020, but Terra has just been crushing recently.
And I'm so upset with myself because I've been tracking Terra and I was like, I'm looking for a good entry. Fib retracements gave me a great entry. They were like, I'm at the spot 618, like a 40% pullback after like a recent pump. And I was like, all right, I need some sideways movement for a couple days and it's perfect. And sideways movement happened. I missed my trade because I just missed my trade. And now we're up, 100% in the last week?
Terra's gone crazy. But hey, you live and you learn, like it's such yeah.
I think it'll go a lot higher, especially because of that, I've been like, if Terra is going to go up 65% in 9 days, their altcoins are going to do great whenever they come out, just because that's just value on the ecosystem in general. And UST will do well because Luna is doing well, because the only way you mint UST is by burning Luna. And so I've been looking at some really interesting projects in the Terra blockchain recently.
That is such a cool concept that you have to burn your Luna to create the stablecoin that is UST, US Terra. Like what and that's how they pay these giant APYs.
Because some people will borrow Luna, and then that interest is paid back to everyone staking in Anchor. Things like that, yeah.
Damn, man. And the demand too for the digital, because it really only benefits the United States, but the US dollar is the global reserve currency, and the demand for the dollar in so many places, like we are very financially privileged here in the US. Like there are so many countries that want US dollars. Like, they consider the US dollar, even though it's inflating.
There's so many countries that are also forced to use the US dollar.
Dude, I read a book called Confessions of an Economic Hitman by John Perkins, and he just talks about like it's so amazing what we learned in history class, and you think the USA is the most benevolent amazing. And then like just reading this book, this guy was talking about how he was the chief economist for an engineering firm here in Boston called Maine. And he would go to these less developed countries like Indonesia, Ecuador. He went to the Middle East, and he would like make these economic reports where, he would inflate the shit out of the numbers, and he'd be like, yeah, like the US will give you a massive loan, and you could pay our engineering firms here in the US to come in and build out this infrastructure. And then this is what we predict it'll do for your economy and everything, up and to the right.
Right.
Sure enough, they get these US dollars, they get funneled right back into the United States, from the government to the less developed country, right back to the private company here in the US. And they built out this infrastructure, and inevitably it really wouldn't lead to the growth that they had promised. And then when these countries couldn't pay back the debt, they'd essentially be trapped to do the US's bidding. And it was like imperialism, but financial imperialism. And you never learn about that shit in history. You don't
it's
even
happening all across Africa right now with China.
Bro, China literally took the US playbook and said, now that's what
they said that's what we're doing now. And they're literally just like Chinese bases and structures inside many African countries right now because they couldn't pay back their loans to China. They were like, okay, you don't need to pay back your loan, but we want to build a base.
Bro, I saw one of the countries tried to they're like, can we renegotiate? China's like, nah, we want the airport.
Yeah, literally. Literally. And so now they all feel threatened, when El Salvador is buying the dip.
Yeah.
When El Salvador
monetize, and it's going to help their grid. They got energy coming from that volcano that would have otherwise not been monetized, and they're mining Bitcoin with that. They got Bitcoin bonds. Like the way they're doing taxes is fucking unreal. Like I love what they are doing in El Salvador. I know they got the know your customer requirements for the Chivo wallet, but still, like it's 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 not perfect, but the fact
it's a start. It's a start.
Amen. It's a great start.
Given I don't ever think I'm going to be walking into a coffee shop trying to buy my large black iced coffee with caramel swirl from Dunks with Bitcoin.
Bro, I'm saying the Lightning Network, like that shit works.
Yeah. But I do think it's a great for countries not as developed financially as the US to be able to jumpstart their economies again. And sort of, in my opinion, if the US keeps messing up and the SEC and Gensler really keep pushing back, leapfrog the US financially. That's like a possibility.
Yeah. I mean, Gary needs to just embrace crypto. Like there is so much economic innovation, alpha to be had. Like we could benefit so much from this. And the SEC's sole mission is to protect investors. So they need to be hiring software engineers like yourself to review the code, make sure these products work and are going to do what they say, but then let the American people get in on it. Like,
why approve a futures ETF, which is inherently more risky,
but not the spot,
but not a spot ETF.
Nuts, dude.
Everything. If the futures ETF depends on the actual underlying asset of Bitcoin, it should prove through it being a derivative of Bitcoin that the spot ETF should also be okay to trade. Because if anything, it's inherently more risky to trade in a derivative than a spot. It's inherently more volatile to trade in a derivative than a spot. And so it's like, if anything, it's by approving a futures ETF, you're saying the spot ETF, like, what do you mean when you say the spot ETF just can't be passed? It doesn't really make sense. And it doesn't benefit investors that want to be exposed to the actual asset.
Yes. Amen. Couldn't agree more. I remember when they were talking about this, I was listening to someone kind of explain the reasoning behind Gary approving the futures spot ETF and not the futures Bitcoin ETF and not the spot Bitcoin ETF. And it was like some law that was from the 20s and the 30s. And I don't remember exactly what, but I'm just thinking to myself, why are we using a law from the 20s or the 30s to try and define
something on the internet
ETF for Bitcoin, which is defined as property by our government, but is way more than that. Bitcoin, it's different. Everyone has a different use and idea and plan for what they're going to do with it, but it can be used as a unit of account, a medium of exchange, and a store of value. And I understand, especially in its earlier, in its getting priced due to game theory, It's going to be up and down and very volatile. But over time, if you just hold and save and keep the majority of your wealth in Bitcoin, and like really that's what your savings is, it's just up and to the right. Like if you
Right.
zoom out, I mean, just
Especially with a I'm under the idea that we are in a area of like extending cycles. So with extended cycles, it'll take longer to get to the tops, it'll take longer to get to the bottoms. Uh, but that time to get to the top and to the bottom are gonna get larger and larger, and there are gonna be diminishing returns because of that. And like in the past two halvings, the two halvings have been longer than the last.
Mhm.
So I don't think we're going to see extremely big Bitcoin drops the way we saw in the past. Like
Agree.
I don't think Bitcoin is going to go back down to $20,000.
No, I don't think it is. I mean, I think the Fed, like we talked about, printing 40% of the money supply, like for better or worse, the Fed is kind of what was like, all right, golden stamp of approval, Bitcoin, let's get it, let's ride, you know. And then you saw Michael Saylor obviously start borrowing US dollars to buy more Bitcoin, buy a shit ton of it. And it just seems at this point like you can't put the genie back in the bottle. Like they've printed this money, it's got to go somewhere. And I think a lot of people, like when they take the time to learn about it, actually do the research, see that it's Bitcoin is backed by energy, proof of work mining. A lot of people are like, damn, like, what am I doing getting 2%, 2.8% back on this almost risk free bond when I'm not even beating inflation, or at least what they're telling us inflation is? It's probably higher. It just, it's not, nothing's inevitable, nothing's guaranteed, but it just seems, not financial advice, that since the supply is fixed, the demand's just going to keep growing, and that means the price of Bitcoin has to go up.
Yeah, purely on that. Purely on supply and demand. Eventually, demand will outweigh supply.
Like Greg Foss always says, it's just math.
It's just math.
It's math. That's
Just
all it
math.
is. I mean,
The thing I do think that's probably difficult is that by running an entire nation, having that control to print money is both good and bad. Good in the sense of like being able to bail us out in the middle of a recession. Um, but it takes a lot of understanding and discipline to be able to control the amount of printing you do. So the idea of like, yes, we have to print during COVID. No one's working. We still need people to be able to live. We still need people to be able to eat. Understandable. The idea of post post I can't even say we're post recession with Omicron. But post initial COVID, wanting to spend even more money, it can work, right? It can work if we're able to pay that money back. I was reading through like the Build Back Better plan, or their most basic page on the White House website, and the idea that if the Build Back Better plan can in fact be paid back through uh, higher taxes on high net worth individuals, I think it's great. I think that actually does follow modern monetary theory, which I've been reading about more recently. Uh, but I also don't know how much I trust our current government to actually follow modern monetary theory in a good way. Modern monetary theory basically says that if you are the reserve currency, if your country happens to be the reserve currency, you can have a higher debt because everyone's relying on you in the first place. But also because that can allow you to control the ebbs and flows of both growth periods and recession. Because all a recession is a correction from high money spending, basically. Any time where we're trying to get dollars back from being out in the economy.
Mm-hmm. I think that is that really interesting point about modern monetary theory, you called it.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact like the US dollar is the global reserve currency. And I think the US, I really pray like we wake up and realize that a lot of countries are waking up to the fact that the US dollar really, as the global reserve currency, obviously only benefits us. China's trying to do the same thing now, obviously in other places like in Africa. And I think now that there's this Bitcoin thing, we're still so early. We still have a long ways to go. But I think a lot of countries, and not necessarily governments, because I don't think governments like losing the power of being able to print money and bail themselves out when need be and whatnot. But it's like the U.S. has so much to gain if they embrace Bitcoin, and like that's the only way we're ever going to be able to pay off our debt. Like, sometimes I just worry the politicians are really only in it for themselves. Like on both sides of the aisle. Like one thing that frustrated me recently was seeing Nancy Pelosi. Someone asked her the question of, and like I said, I think this happens on both sides of the aisle. If there's one thing Democrats and Republicans agree on, it's that they think they should be able to trade individual tickers on the stock market,
right?
Even though they might be creating legislation that affects these industries greatly. But the fact that Nancy Pelosi would come up and say, someone asked her, like, do you think that you guys should be able to trade individual stocks? And she's like, well, it's a free market. And my thing is just like, well, if it's a free market, then why do like 12 people who aren't really even elected, unelected officials, like they're chosen to be on the Federal Reserve, why do they get to decide when we can and can't print money? And it's still so early. Like the best thing the US could do is just embrace Bitcoin. And as it starts to appreciate, over time, I really think it would be like the only tool that we'd ever have of paying off $30 trillion. Like, I don't think people understand how big $30 trillion is. Like the gold market cap is 10 trillion. Bitcoin market cap's not even 1 trillion. Like 30 trillion in debt is a lot of debt. And like you said, as the global reserve currency, we got some leniency. But over time, as these other countries start to realize that Bitcoin is a much easier currency to use to go back and forth if you need to change between currencies. It's a liquid market, 24/7, 365. It trades constantly. It's a permissionless, decentralized network. I mean,
and also those countries that were, sort of forced to borrow from the United States or borrow from China, they're like, why would I borrow from you at some ridiculous interest rate that's only going to hold my economy down versus buying the dip?
Bro, that in that Confessions of an Economic Hitman book, like reading this like killed me. The author, John Perkins.
That's why you should print more money. You print more money to buy the dip.
Yeah, literally. And like you're saying, these other countries, like, man, they're salty. Like the country's not, but the country is essentially salty that the U.S. kind of screwed them on this deal. And John Perkins in the book, he's like, what caused him to release the book? Because everyone like was telling him, no, don't do it. Like you're going to get in trouble, blah, blah, blah. When 9/11 happened in 2001, something clicked for him. And he's like, I realized how much other countries hated us here in the U.S. due to like just that unfair financial finessing, whatever you want to call it, the predatorial takes. And Bitcoin is just a more open, honest, decent. It doesn't care what kind of person you are. It doesn't care. It just does what it's programmed to do. And the way Satoshi aligned the incentives and the fact he was able to just walk away from the project and anyone can opt in. It just seems like what a special creation. And it's fostered the way for a bunch of these other chains too, which hopefully can also create an even more fair and equitable world for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, even now I found these new projects. They're like synthetic assets or mirror assets. They basically track they track a lot of the big companies that trade on the New York Stock Exchange.
So like wrapped Bitcoin on the Ethereum network, like they're essentially just like
it'll be mirror Tesla or mirror Amazon, mirror Facebook. You have no rights to the underlying assets. Like you don't actually own the stock, but you get that price exposure, which for places that don't have access to the New York Stock Exchange, they might have internet access, but they aren't allowed to trade on the New York Stock Exchange. Their only access now to the prices and share prices of those assets are through Mirror. They can buy some Mirror Amazon, they can buy some Mirror Tesla. And then you can do some really weird stuff with those, with also borrowing and lending. Also, this none of this is financial advice. To both long and short at the same time, and just gain a consistent like 30% on your Facebook or your Amazon. Your Mirror Facebook or your Mirror Amazon.
Man, that's so cool to hear. I mean, the whole like the idea of the world becoming more and more tokenized, to the point where it's like you need to buy a house and say you don't need to
buy an NFT.
Anymore. And literally everything just becomes tokenized. I mean, it's It's very plausible.
And then the builder of that house gets the residual income from the house being sold again. Everybody wins.
Bro, I didn't even think about it like that, but like that is so true. You can put it in the programming, like, all right, I built this house. Like, if anyone wants to buy it, just so you know, if you ever try and sell it again, I'm gonna get some of that.
I'm gonna get 10%.
I'm gonna get mine.
I'm gonna get mine.
A forever, like, or
Yeah.
20-year royalty.
And that's like the way you can really create like generational wealth. That's the things you can pass down. Besides just the house of just hold this house, the price of this house might go up, will probably go up, versus hold this NFT that gives you the rights to have this residual income, or whoever holds this NFT owns the rights to this house or the pink slips to this car, and there's a specific wallet address that 10% of every sell goes to.
Yep. Yeah, I'm very grateful that we were born during the time we were, because I mean, like, right as our adulthood's really starting, like, I guess, you know, not right as, but like the fact that we're getting to live through this now as stuff is like I think the world is just going to become more and more tokenized, and I think that's going to lead to a more fair, equitable, global world where, you know, I'd love to get to the point where you can literally just use Bitcoin to transact with everything. Like, it's kind of a pipe dream, but it just we need government to some sense for like roads and stuff, but just like minimal government, global, decentralized, permissionless world where people can just vote with their wallet and feed, and just
no Western Union, no MoneyGram,
no middlemen taking fees for unnecessary shit. You know, like
5 to 7 days of waiting for my bank to tell them it's okay to transfer this money, or, you know, the 5 to 7 days it takes for Coinbase to verify with your bank that they actually got your funds.
Yep.
It's like you are your own bank, which is a lot of responsibility, you know? Like, it's crazy to think that I have like a lot of my like net worth, I say net worth, but because it's the word, but most of my net worth is held with about like 924 character phrases.
No, same. Honestly, that's why like I run my own node. I've started to custody more of my Bitcoin, but for the most part, like, honestly, I probably keep the least amount of Bitcoin on my own node just as I get more and more comfortable. And because it's like, part of me is like, all right, let me make sure I spread it around. Like, I encourage people for, like, if possible, keep your own non-custodial Bitcoin. But, you know, I keep a lot on Coinbase or Gemini because it's like, I want that assurance that, you know, it's not all my responsibility. You know, that's why I try and balance it out until I get more and more familiar with how the technology works, you know, use it. It's just so much to learn. And I think you bring up a really good point. It is a lot more responsibility and everyone's different. So you should really take the time to learn. And it's nothing to be ashamed of to custody your Bitcoin. It's just obviously not what kind of the ethos and the purpose of the network was. And do understand, if you're custodying your Bitcoin with someone,
right,
if shit hits the fan with, and I don't think it will, but if shit were to hit the fan with Coinbase, like, and the government tried to confiscate, it would just be a messy situation. And
right, but you know, that also gives you a person to call. Like, that does give you a physical person to call and be like, where's my money? Versus some people don't want to take on that risk of like, I just have 9 24 character phrases.
Yeah,
I have a customer support line, you know?
Absolutely. I mean, now we're seeing banks too, you know, they've dug these trenches around themselves so deep, but they're even now trying to think about like custodying Bitcoin for their customers. I mean, JP Morgan's offering Bitcoin exposure for a lot of their high net worth individuals, or maybe even I see a lot of banks in general across the board thinking about custodying Bitcoin for people. And then the FDIC is contemplating, should they insure this cryptocurrency in the same way they insure people's checkings and savings. It's going to be so interesting to see how it plays out.
Yep. Well, I'm excited. I'm definitely excited for the future.
I am too. And, you know, like, I love the like keeping my own keys and the decentralized aspect, but I think there's a lot of people out there too who would much rather just kind of keep Bitcoin as a store of value and have someone else custody it. And I think the FDIC, if they did approve it, would go a long way to getting a lot of boomers, if you will, or people with money to like,
just more adoption in general.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Malcolm, I always like to end these by opening the floor, and I'll ask you one question as well. And it can be anything from any highly debated topic today, or something as simple as what is your favorite ice cream flavor? So I'll go first. I actually asked this the other day to my buddy, but what would you say is the best gift to receive during Christmas? And then what would you say is the best thing to gift someone during Christmas?
The best thing to receive during Christmas is something you will use for more than the first year after Christmas. I feel like sometimes you get some like when I was younger, you get some toys, you get some toys, you play around with the toys for a year, or like if you're really hard handed with your toys, they last for a couple months, and then you're asked out of toys for a bit.
Yep.
Something that could last longer than a year, whether that be like a physical item or you give someone $5 of Bitcoin. Like I think a couple family members is just getting $5 of Bitcoin from me, and I'm just gonna be like, hold it. I promise you,
That's
it's
exactly what I'm doing. I literally bought these Amazon like shitty little, and I'm gifting them tangible Bitcoin, and then I'm just gonna actually send them $10 and be like, all right, now you got tangible Bitcoin and you got Bitcoin, and don't sell your, you can sell this piece of shit thing, but don't sell your actual Bitcoin.
Yep. And the worst thing I think you can get on Christmas, being alone. I feel like that's the hardest probably gift you can get is just your own company by yourself sometimes. Because it definitely probably is hard to, like Christmas is normally like a festive time, you want to spend it with people you care about. And I know it definitely can be a hard time for a lot of people. Whether they might be traveling or they're living in a new place and they don't really have family close by,
Yep.
or they family might have passed on and it's just them. So that's probably the worst Christmas thing it could probably happen to you.
Absolutely. I mean, I think as I get older, I just noticed that like relationships with other people, my friends, family, having decentralized friends, if you will, being able to see people is like, as much as I love seeing gains in my crypto portfolio, I don't think there's ever a number I'll hit where I'm like, now I'm happy. Now I get, it's like the time I really cherish is with friends, family, experiencing stuff. I think cryptocurrency as a gift, best answer, but also my buddy said traveling, and like I think that's also up there with it. Just having experiences, really getting to enjoy time with your friends and family and feel loved, and hopefully most people. And there's a lot of pain and suffering in this world, but I hope everyone gets to spend time with loved ones, and very few people go lonely on Christmas, because I agree that is a tough way to spend it.
Yeah. I'd say my question for you, football related. So do you have any opinions on Tom Brady losing to the Saints? What was it, last week? At like 9-0. It was like surprising. No one expected it.
It was surprising, and I was just butthurt because I had Leonard Fournette, and they just put up an absolute goose egg. I had Ryan Suck up too, -1 points. Like, luckily it's fantasy playoffs. I'm still winning. I'm doing like the 2-week thing, so
yeah,
but I'm
up
another like 35 points right now. So,
knock on wood. Knock on wood.
Yeah, amen. But yeah, I was shocked by that. Not what I was expecting, but good for the Saints. Still in it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming on, Malcolm. It's been a pleasure. We'll have to bring you back on the Ben Mucker podcast, and thank you to anyone who tuned in today.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime. Feel free to hit me up. I'll always be here.
Word. Noted.